All right, I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging we are in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me is Lynn Nesbitt to my left and Jerry Sneesby to my far left. The assessor today are Kim Wong and Brittany Santucci, and the recording secretary is Belen Rojo. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that the applicants or assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application being brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. So can we do the swearing in?
Please state your full name.
Kim Wong.
And you affirm the evidence about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Sorry, please state your full name.
Brittany Santucci.
And you swear the evidence about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your full name.
Rocky Newfeld.
And you affirm the evidence about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Yeah, please state your business.
Oh, yeah, I do. I'll hand it to you.
All right, the first property up today is 815 Sterling Line Parkway, and the issue is assessed value, so you can proceed.
The subject property is 815 Sterling Line. Roll number is 100-067-75965. It's a residential apartment block that's 4 stories high. It's built in 2018 and has 60 units with 42 indoor parking stalls and 48 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $1,490 to get a potential income of $1,073,000. Use a 2.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $1,043,000, and we use a 36% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $663,000. Capped at 5%, we have an estimated market value of $13,278,000. On page 4 are our rent comparables, so that the rents that we've estimated are in line with what's on the market. On page 5 is information on how we derive our cap rates. On page 6 are relevant excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act. On page 7 and 8 are some pictures of the subject property. page is the permit that was taken out for the construction of the new apartment building. Their declared construction cost is about $12 million. We didn't have any actual rent or expense information on the property as it's a new property. The rents that we've used for the property are supported by the market and are actually probably a little bit lower than what the actual rents are. And the 36% expense ratio that we've used is reasonable for a new building. The permit value also supports the model value and has to maintain the assessed value at $13,278,000.
Okay, is that your presentation?
Yes.
Do you have questions?
Yes. Well, what does, this is a supplemental assessment?
Yes.
Do you have the effective dates?
I believe it was July
July?
2018.
So it was put on the roll, July 2018. Okay. So before that, it was under construction?
It was probably completed.
Well,
mostly completed.
That it was being built, but you know, did you have the date of the occupancy permit? Would have been in and around July?
No, it was probably in 2017.
Well, don't say probably, do you know?
I know the occupancy started in 2017.
Okay. So at the time that you issued your supplemental, was the site full or 2.8% vacancy?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So, and it is common, I mean, it's reasonable to assume that you build a new apartment, it doesn't fill up overnight, right? It takes some time to absorb. Do you have an estimate of what you've seen in other buildings as to how long that absorption period may be?
It ranges. It could be a few months to...
Have you ever seen a few months?
I have seen about 3 months.
On a brand new construction or on a redevelopment?
On new buildings.
Okay.
But I've also seen very long lease-up periods.
Okay. And the workup that was presented here on page 3, is this all derived from the model?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that the rental rate was, you thought it might be a bit lower than the actual. So do you have any information on what that actual is?
Yeah, the actual rents are there, about $1,666.
Sorry, 16.
$1,677 approximately, and we've used $1,496 in this case.
For the 60 units, okay. And but that's a range, that's there's 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, correct? So there are some that are lower, some that are higher. And you just put on one rate?
Yes,
Okay.
it's an average.
In the selection of capitalization, I noted that your multifamily really shows no distinction between high or low rise, A's or B's. It's all the same rate. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so this one was applied at the lowest end of the range?
Yes.
And other than this chart, was there any other, you just confirm you've got no other capitalization rate information listed here?
Regards to sales, no.
Okay, thank you, those are my questions.
Any questions, Jerry?
No, not at this time.
Then,
When you talked about the rents and you gave actual rents on average at about 1677, what is the range? Or do you have it?
What is the range?
Yeah.
I can give you maybe an estimate if you like.
Do you must have got the actual from somewhere.
Yeah,
Okay.
from the property manager.
Okay.
Yeah, but the information is post-reference information, and
Okay.
we're typically not allowed to present post-reference information
Correct.
here.
Correct, okay. Well, if you don't
So-
have it within the reference period, then that's fine.
Well, the thing is new,
Okay.
and so the reference
Right.
period would have been.
Oh, right, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, there was no
It
building
wasn't there.
Yeah, it wasn't there. So there
Okay,
was
that
no-
makes
there were
sense
no
to me,
rents.
of course. Okay. I didn't have any questions.
okay, now for new construction, as I understand it, the city typically allows, issues a supplemental after a lease-up period. They allow a certain number of months for a lease-up. Is that what occurred in this instance?
Yes, like they started occupying in, maybe mid-late 2017, and yeah, we issued the supplementary notices in about July 2018.
Okay, so this was effective July 1st, 2018?
As
Okay,
far,
so-
yeah, I believe so, yes.
You're saying really there's about a 6-month grace period for
It
lease?
might have been a little bit more in this case.
Okay. All right, no more questions. You can give your presentation. Okay.
Okay. The subject property is newly built, as indicated, and in situations like this, I guess the main issue here is the absorption period and the capitalization rate. The actual income, and I understand this is post-reference, but I wanted to show you how I got to where I went to. What we did is we looked at the post-reference income, and that's on page 3. And you can see that the very small fine print here, but on the actuals, you'll note that the vacancy rate for the period of 2018 is 12.43%. So as at the end of 2018, it was 12.43%. And it's surprising if you look at the vacancy loss, how it actually decreases and then increases. And if you take a look at the months of August and September, how the vacancy rate actually increased dramatically. And this is one of the issues that happen to newly built buildings. There's the assessor's talking about the rental rates. Well, what they do is they provide inducements to get people to move in. So the inducements were granted originally, and 1-year term, maybe you get a free month or something like that. And when the month runs out, the people leave. So this cycle, it sort of ratchets, and it does generally improve over time. What we see in most cases, it's about 5 years to reach a comfortable vacancy amount. In some extreme cases, we've seen it take as long as 10 years. So it's not fill up, we're done. It's begin to fill up, lose after a year, restart refilling, and lose after another year, and try to ratchet up. You'll know that the last month in it, which was a budget month, not an actual, they're thinking that their vacancy has dropped to 5%. But of course, the month before, it's at 20%. For the year, with the actual in the budget, it is 12.43%. The other thing in the budget that I wanted to point out to you was the line item for realty taxes, and that's about roughly 2/3 of the way down. And you'll note that they had budgeted $86,000, $86,146 for taxes. That was budget, and the actual taxes were much higher. Now, from that, what we've done is, we're gonna try to bring that back to the reference period, because this is really the only credible way of doing it, because you're not gonna find a business model that's going to replicate the vacancy performance, or even the rental performance, because at this rental rate, we're kind of outside of the range of most of the research that's done. If you know how most of the research is gathered on rental properties, it's through CMHC, and their tracking at the upper end of the range is sparse, because they rely on voluntary responses. So generally, when you get into the lower rent range, you're seeing a lot more reliability. So that's one of the reasons we look at the future and then go back. And, you know, with all due respect to the reference period, I think this is the most credible way of doing it. So we did start on my page 1 with the actual income, which is stated in the bottom left. And that, if one were to assume that there's a 10% vacancy included with it, the previous period in 2016 would be a higher vacancy at 15%. So we've adjusted the income downwards, and you can see from 1132 to 1076. So it's about, you know, like I said, it's a 5% decline in the rental income. On the expense side, interestingly enough, most of the other costs were in line. The one we always look at is the repairs and maintenance, and this was $87,000 on 60 units. It is a little bit low, but we did not adjust for it. I think they'll continue to benefit from the low R&M for a few more years. What was stuck out was, of course, that the taxes, the $86,000, the actual taxes are $151,000. So the performance estimated back to 2016 is an NOI of 624, and that is in contrast to the assessors at 663. So that's our first difference, and it's but I explained how we got there, but the big reason is 2.8% vacancy on the assessor side versus a higher vacancy on our side, and of course higher income as well. The cap rate is the same argument. We just love going back there, but 5% does not exist because you can't carry a loan at 5%. In the old days, when they forced us to use mortgage equity to calculate our cap rates, and I'm sure one of our board members remembers those days when we had to do mortgage equity. That the concept of mortgage equity is pretty simple. The bank managers wanted to see if the place made enough money to pay the mortgage. And a 5% cap rate does not make enough money to pay the mortgage. That's the bottom line. And so our Collier's reported rates on page 8, and this is a advertising blurb, and you'll see that our range is 475 to 575, and of course ours are calculated with closing costs in them, as we keep reminding everyone. And the other thing that influences this is, remember I said about the mortgage equity method? If you have a pension fund who have a much lower earning requirement than a bank, they will come in at a lower rate and a lower requirement. And you know, for example, we know that some of the teachers' pension funds have really break-evens at 2.5% and 3% return for their members, which is a little bit different than your bank, which is looking for a 4%, 4.5% loan. So in a competitive environment where the REITs and the pension funds are looking for investments, it has had an effect on the multifamily. But one REIT and one pension fund do not make the market. The bulk of all lending is still through chartered banks. And as a result, the chartered banks' interest rates impact the cap rate, and that's why 5% doesn't exist. The actual break even, which I worked out at one point a few months ago, was 5.4%. That an apartment has to generate a cap of 5.4, or an NOI of 5.4% in order to satisfy a loan of a standard ratio. On our page 12, we've adjusted the cap rates, and this is, we gave you all the reasons for it on page 11, and I think you've all heard it before, between the Colliers advertising rates and the actual rates, but the realistic rates are 5.25 to 6.25 on the blocks, with a bit of a skewer for the low rise as slightly a bit higher rate. And this is what we generally use. So now we've applied this at 5.75, and one of our concerns was the current absorption rate. But since we did take into account for that in our vacancy, I think we can safely recommend a slightly lower cap rate than this. I did do this work up myself, and when I came to the cap rate, I wasn't, hadn't finished my frame of my thinking. Strangely enough, a bit of a coincidence is we get these this is anecdotal, but we get these requests from all across North America for properties for sale, or people want to buy properties. And while I was sitting here, I just got one from a major acquisition company in the US. They will buy any property, any multifamily property, with a cap rate above 6.5%. Now, that's the real world. This nonsense on the 5% cap rates is going to pass, and when loans start coming in, we're going to see a change. But it is something that we do see for now, so we have to respect that. But in the long run, it's not sustainable. So I was just going to make a small change here on the 624,105 at 5.5. Oh, and the other reason for the 5.5, I'll just. Anyway, the new number is 11,347,363, rounded to 11,347,000. And the mention of the comparable is, which we're looking at, is on page 23. You have two new units on Ward Avenue, and first at 333 Ward, it sold for $18 million, and that capped at 5.5%. And you've probably heard of that one being testified to death, how the city assessor has it at 5, but it was really 5.5 because the city assessor was using the offer, not the closing costs. So we were involved in the transaction. It closed at 5.5%, new construction, 3-story walk-up. Comparable, I think the rent rates were a little bit lower than what we have here at Sterling Lion. And the second on page 24, which was across the street, and this was one that was actually the costs on it. When it was built, it was projected at an 8% return, but given the vacancy rate that I told you about, they haven't been able to stabilize below 10%. They've actually been going at a 6% rate of return. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Okay, questions, Mr. Brown?
Okay, I guess on your page 3. Oh, sorry, your page 4. Okay, I guess page 3 and 4, that's pretty much, page 3 is where you got the income from, right?
Correct.
So they're in, for the vacancy, they've allotted for 150,000 in vacancy.
Yes, that's for that year.
Okay, so their 1,132,000 is what they actually took in, accounting for the 12.5% vacancy.
Right, as full, they would generate 1.2, but they're got the 15% vacancy, and then there's the rental incentive, and you can see it's pretty heavy, and there's parking revenue that they're earning, and locker rental.
So basically, that number includes a bit their vacancy already, right?
That's correct, yes, and that's what we've stated on the previous page.
Okay, and you're adding another 5% vacancy on top of that.
Oh, yes, because this is 2018's performance, and we're going back to the reference here. And I think it's reasonable to assume that if we have a 2018 performance, which is actually 12.43%, that the reference period would have been higher, or any previous period it would have been higher. Because the movement, and you can see that, for example, the August and Septembers were 20%.
So if you were valuing a building, would you stabilize at 15% vacancy?
On a valuation, what you would probably see is a discounted cash flow analysis that showed a 5 to 10 year performance that was based on startup, which, you open the doors, and if you're at 50% after 3 or 4 months, and then you're building up to a 10 to 12% over 2 years, and you're shooting for 5 to 6% on 5 years. And then what you do is you would do look at the net present value of the cash flows and discount them back to a current day. That's how they would generally value units under construction.
Would you stabilize a property at 15%?
No, I'm saying that's how you would stabilize it. You would stabilize on the long term. You would be looking forward. And of course, under our law, we don't look forward. And of course, the city assessor goes back every 2 years and takes a snapshot in time. So 2 years from now, you're going to see a better performance, and then the value of it goes up. And that's just the nature of our system, right? Your first years are bad. And if, as the law says, if you look at the market value as of the reference date, you have to sell it, and you're selling it with a big vacancy, you're going to be forced to take a discount.
So is that how you would value a property, though?
For ad valorem purposes, yes, this is how we would value it.
And do you believe it's accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so the so you added a 5% vacancy on top of the 12% vacancy that's already.
Well, no. Yes, that's correct.
And regarding your the tax calculation that you have at 151,000, I was just wondering how you calculated that.
Well, we had the actual tax bill.
Do you have it?
I don't have it in front of me now. I probably have it on my phone, but yeah, we had the actual tax bill.
Okay, so you calculated it at 151,000.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's an estimate, right?
No, that's the actual 2018. They estimated, the point I was making here is that they estimated their taxes substantially lower than were actual, and when we're presented with this information, which is half budget and half actual performance, there were the two issues on it to deal with were the vacancy and the taxes, because the taxes were not known. So they have to be corrected. The rest of these costs were known.
Okay. I'd like to, I guess, present some information, some rebuttal information regarding the taxes.
Sure.
Do I get to look at them first? I mean, I don't care if you submit it, it's kind of just appropriate that you let me look at them first, and then, in case I was concerned about them.
This is what I calculated the taxes out to be.
Well, sorry, this is inappropriate, this is not even the right thing, this is before the reassessment. I said we got the tax bill, because when we got the supplemental, we got the tax bill. Why don't you bring that?
Is this the actual tax bill?
No, it's before the reassessment.
These are my calculations.
Okay,
The new assessed value is $13 million, and the portion is $5 million.
I don't know
The
how much
45%.
value a calculation has. I mean, if you could bring an actual tax bill, would be one thing, but a calculation is just a calculation.
Just for the board's interest, I'll show you a very simplified way of understanding this. At this point in time, net taxes were $18,172 on an assessment of $1,455,000. That's an effective tax rate of 1.25%. And just you multiply that times the current assessment of $13,278,000, and you get $165,833. Now, we've actually used 151 because my calculation included you have to strip out the frontage levy out of that. Or sorry, not strip it out, but it's a constant. So, the numbers stand.
Okay, and in light of this not an actual tax bill, I don't think we should permit it into evidence.
Here's their actual tax bill.
Okay, do
If you don't mind if I look at that first now?
Sure, if you want.
Okay, this is not another actual tax bill. This is a supplementary tax notice for a part year for the increased value. Again, that's not an
Well,
actual
but we're
tax.
talking about part year for,
No, but it's gotta be, then you have to do is you have to take an estimate on the days that it was in place.
Yeah,
as
and
well,
it's there.
As well as the incremental amount. Remember, that's an incremental amount. That's not a tax bill. The additional.
but since this is for a 6-month period, you double it, you get the annual tax bill.
No, you don't, because that's the amount of the increase you have to then add it to the previous one. For example, what's the, may I see it again? We don't,
In any event, we're talking about a difference of some
Okay.
15,000, which is,
no, but can I show you the error on this?
okay.
And I'm gonna approach you. So I don't disagree with doubling it, but what the assessor failed to do was to add in this one. You have to add this in because you see it says portioned assessment change, not
Okay.
portioned assessment. This is a bill for the increase. Okay, so you take 67 plus 67, which is 134.
So this number and this number equals your 86.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's one.
So
Yeah,
because we only have a
134.
part year of taxes,
Right.
I provided you with an estimate of what a full year's taxes would
Okay,
be.
so 67 times 2 plus 18,000 is the tax bill.
Yeah.
So that's
But we're
150.
really talking
No.
about small change in terms of,
Well, no, it adds up to 152,000, and I put in 151,433.
yeah.
Okay,
And then, that's why I wanted to see how you calculated it, because I wasn't sure how you did it.
well, my formula for calculating is to look at the effective tax rate, multiply it times the actual assessment, and so we take the actual tax rate,
Mhm.
which is without the frontage levy,
Mhm.
and it's much, I mean, we're always within 3 or 4 cents.
And
to the
that's
amount.
essentially what I've done with the 18 tax bill.
No, but what you forgot to do was add in the old bill. Because that's only a change notice, that's an increase amount. You send a bill for the increase.
The calculation that I gave you is for a $13 million property. That is the,
No,
that
it
is,
isn't.
that is what it is.
The portion assessment change, you can only get a bill for the change amount.
Your 151,000 is an estimate. I've provided an estimate of the full year's taxes.
No, it's incorrect.
Well,
I'm
in
sure
the
we
event,
can, we can go, there's a computer just across the other way there that we can punch out the actual tax bill.
we're getting lost in semantics here, whether it's like 10,000 more, 10,000 less is not going to.
Okay,
When in fact a quarter point change in the cap rate will have much more impact on the final valuation.
well, yeah, I'll save it for summation.
Okay,
Move on.
That would be all my questions.
all right, Jerry, questions of the appellant?
Sure. Do you know what the actual total cost, project cost was?
No, I didn't get that. This is a pretty, good organization, so, they tend to come in, at or under budget.
Okay,
Because this isn't their first project, this is actually, a cookie cutter design. They built this one on Pembina Highway, and this is, I think, round 2 or 3 of the ones in Sterling Lion. So they're pretty experienced with it.
and they have similar projects in the same area here, do they not?
Yes, they do, they do,
Yeah.
they have the connected, this is what one's called the Spot, and there's the Spot, then there's the Spot on Pembina, so they've done this project the 2 times.
So are you recommending 11,000,003 at 5.5%, is that?
That's correct.
Okay, that's my question.
Lynn?
No questions?
Okay, so the city has allowed a lease-up period of 6 months where they essentially not making any tax change. How does that not compensate for the vacancy?
Well, think of it on a earnings per month basis. So let's say for sake of argument, the door's open, and I don't know for 100% sure, but I'm gonna guess the doors opened in August of 2018, because, or 17, because in 18 there's this very high vacancy. A year later. It didn't open up and fill up, it gradually moved in. So for the first 6 months, they would actually be losing money. Because with an occupancy rates of anything below probably 60%, you're losing money. And the city allows it because if we brought in the statements from those first years, they'd have to pay us money in taxes. Now, because we're valuing the income method, it's not earning, it's not into positive cash flow. So when you get into positive cash flow, then you begin the basis for it. But, so after that point, it's the question of stabilization, and how do you choose to stabilize it? And from our experience, this is how we calculated it. I don't think that they're giving the owner any presents by waiting. I think they're just saving themselves a lot of grief. The city's saving themselves a lot of grief by trying to assess properties. Rather than coming to the board with a property, you show them your statements the first 6 months and say, look, I've been losing money. How can you assess that? I think they're just
We wouldn't do that because it's usually post-reference information.
No, but I think they're sidestepping the argument. I think it's a physical fact that it's not making money.
Okay, but if the city were to come with a valuation, and then say it's 100% vacant, so, and we would apply a 25% vacancy rate on any property that's vacant.
Well, that's only for single tenants, and that's not, I don't think I've ever seen that applied to residential multifamily. And it's not, that used to be in the law, and that's not in the law any longer.
Well, all properties I've encountered that have been 100% vacant have been recognizing the residual value of the property.
Right, and it's been just a procedure. Now, the problem with that, on a really high vacancy rate application, is the shortfall catches up with you. And, basically, when you pass 15% on vacancy, you've lost your highest and best use. You shouldn't even be doing it that way. 25% vacancy, you can often show a negative cash flow or a cash flow that's below the residual value of the land. I personally think the number is close to 15%, in some cases 18%, depending on the size of the shortfall applied. But again, you don't meet your highest and best use. Remember what we've done here is we're showing you performance that's annualized for the year with the last months at 20% vacancy, and throughout it's averaging 12.43%, and we're asking for a change, but the city's at 2.8%. Who's more reasonable?
Okay, I have no more questions, so summation, Mr. Moon?
The valuation that we presented is a stabilized valuation, as if the property was stabilized. To basically, a property probably would not stabilize at 15 or 17% vacancy. If you're stabilizing at, if you have 15 or 17% vacancy, the property is not stable. So if you value off of an unstable property, it's probably going to yield an inaccurate value. The valuation that we've provided is as if it were stable, and I believe that it is a reasonable estimated value, especially considering that their declared construction cost is $12 million, and as they maintain the assessment at $13 million.
Okay.
I sort of half agree with what he's saying, but the problem here is you can't make an assumption that something's stable when in reality it's not stable. This is not stable. You can't stabilize artificially, and that's what the assessment department has done. And when these properties are built, as I mentioned earlier in my testimony, there is a tremendous amount of forward looking, probably looking at 10 to 20 year windows. And so the first years of stabilization are painful. Now, the assessment department, by law, has to look backwards performance. I didn't make that up. That's just the nature of, that's our law. They can't accept, the act can't allow forward looking. So when you're faced with that, what an assessment has to do is every 2 years is then they reassess. That's how the system works. So the first year is going to be bad. 2 years from now they reassess and performance is better. It'll be 4 years from now before they can actually capture a stabilized amount, because that is the nature of a new construction. Now the amount we're looking for in difference is relatively small, at $40,000 in NOI, but I think that we reasonably apply a higher vacancy to establish that. Just bear in mind, it's a very small amount. And then the other issue being the capitalization rate. The proven capitalization rates are at 5.5%. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's do the vacant commercial before having our first bid. So we got,
Just one more question. Are you using the 8%
Yeah, I guess so. Actually, let me just, no, we're not, and, when are we gonna be hearing this? Later in the order, right?
It's the last one.
Yeah, I'll have a replacement brief by then, so.
Okay.
May I have, 30 seconds,
Sure.
and when you,
This is for the last one on the document.
Oh, thank you.
This is one.
Oh.
I'm getting one now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Vacant commercial, years 2017 and 2018, so we will start with 2017. So you can, oh yes, and there's three, points of revision, class, liability, and value. Are you proceeding on?
no, I think we're just sticking with, value.
Value, okay.
We weren't quite sure, because this was city-owned land, but, it's strange. Do you have, you've got briefs for both years, right?
I do.
Okay.
No, I don't. But I had an extra copy for the brief.
Right, because we used the same one, okay. Got it. Did you, was there one you needed an extra copy from me on?
No.
Okay, so you're saying you've got one brief for both years, even though it's separate reference dates?
That's correct.
Okay.
You'll see why in the evidence, I
Yeah.
think it should clear.
Right, no, I just wanted to make sure that we're not missing something. You can proceed then.
Thank you. This is file number 18-715. The roll number is 0309-299-9210. There is no address for this property, but it is located near the corner of Kirkbridge and Pembina Highway. It is a vacant commercial lot. The land area is 27,797 square feet, and it is zoned C2. If you flip to page 2, I just have some aerial and exterior photos of the parking lot, vacant lot, used as a parking lot. If you flip to page 3, I just have how we came up with our land valuation summary. So we have the 27,797 square feet, and we applied a net rate of $31.37 per square foot to come up with a land value of $872,000. Below the land valuation summary, I have my land sale comparables. I have 4 comparables there. They're all zone C2. The newest sale is November 7, 2013. The 2 older sales are similar size. We have an average sale price per square foot of $40.01, and then our time adjusted sale price averages $49.28. I'd just like to point out these comps are all probably on better locations. That's why they're obviously higher than what we've applied here in the subject property. If you flip to page 4, I just have some aerial photos of the comparables to show where they are in Pembina. So the first, on page 4 there's 1566 Pembina, which sold twice. or 2300 Pembina, and then on page 5, if you flip to, I have a picture of 1585 St. Mary's, comparable 4. And then I have, on page 6, I have capitalization rates, which don't really apply to this one. And then on page 7, I have the Municipal Assessment Act information. And my recommendation is to maintain the 2017 assessed value of $872,000 based on the $31.37 square foot. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Any questions?
Just the first question, kind of a procedural question, is your 2017 and 2018 briefs, they use the same comparables, do they not?
Yes.
So the difference is just perhaps someone's opinion of the time difference?
It's just with the model generated for the square, price per square foot.
If it's okay with the board, if we spend more time in depth on one of the years in the comparables, then and can we assume that the same questions and answers will pertain to the next one?
Sure.
We don't have to go over them twice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm always willing to be expedient.
And I always gotta ask the question. In your introduction, you said that this is at the corner of Kirkbridge and Pembina. Can you show me where the Pembina frontage is on this property?
I just meant it's near the corner of.
It's
Pembina.
near.
The property that lease, or the people that lease it from the city, they're the corner of Pembina and Kirkbridge, and then this lot is to the rear of it.
That has no Pembina frontage.
No, the only entrance is through Kirkbridge Drive.
And your comparables are all on major arteries, are they not?
Yes,
With access off those major arteries?
yes,
And you did mention it was inferior.
yes.
Okay. In general, okay, sorry. Now, on page 2, top picture, you're showing the subject, and that you can confirm that to the left side of that property, which would be to the west, that is a rail line?
Yes.
And are you aware which rail line that is?
No, I'm
It's
not.
the main line, CN Letelier line? Okay, were you aware? You didn't know that? What the
I
name
don't
of
know
it?
I know there's a rail line, I just don't know.
It's an active rail line though, right?
I assume so, yes.
In your comparables, I was just paging through them, are any of them impacted by rail?
I don't think, no, none of the comparables have a rail line.
Now, do you know what sort of setbacks are applied for rail? Whether, first of all, two-part question, formal setbacks, do you know what they are?
No, I do not.
And what about a reasonable setback? If someone wants to develop a property and perhaps put an apartment block up, how close do they want to be to that rail line?
I do not know.
Is it fair to say it would be a detrimental influence on their property to be close to a rail line?
I would assume they'd want to be farther away from it.
Now, you're here representing the city of Winnipeg?
Yes,
Now, the city of Winnipeg owns this piece of land.
yes.
Now, when the city of Winnipeg leased this land to this party, did they perform an appraisal on it?
I am unsure. I was never provided an appraisal.
So how did they set the rental rate without an appraisal? Isn't it city policy?
I am unsure. I do not know.
Well, do you know what the rental rate is?
I know what they're paying the city based on the stall count for,
Okay, but roughly, how much is that per annum? Do you know what that is?
yeah, 1 second. I think it was around 200, I think it was your value. Well, Or well,
13,000
like the 13,860
per year,
per year.
on a net basis. Now, in the city of Winnipeg, to be fair, they do have different methods of establishing rental value on their sites. But a commonly applied factor is 10%. Are you aware of that? So what they do is they take 10% of their appraised value and then establish the rental rate on that basis.
I'm not aware of
But as a representative of the city, you should be able to find that out, wouldn't you, for this purpose of this appraisal, or this assessment review, have gone to that trouble to, because that number is significantly lower than what the assessment department has put on it. And so my question, long-winded, is we have a bit of a break between what PP&D values the land at and what the assessor values it at, correct?
that. Yeah, well, we valued it at what would we consider market value, so.
Now, I have some rebuttal information, and there's 5 copies, and this is pretty simple stuff, and I think you've gone over it already, but I just wanted to now, what the first page is, or what these are excerpts from the City of Winnipeg's traffic map. This is a publication put out by the city, and the legend on it is on the top of my first page. So these are their numbers. So now the subject on the first page is not being tracked. The number you see there, 31,700, that's Pembina Highway. So fair to say that Kirkbridge Avenue doesn't get anywhere near the amount of traffic that Pembina does?
I don't have any data for the traffic on it.
Well, you're assessing this as if it were an independent property, correct? Not an assemblage to the front property?
I'm assessing this as the lot to the rear of the property.
Right, but as a lot unto itself, you're not assessing it with consideration that it's adjacent to the neighbor, right? You know, the assessment department doesn't do that, do they?
I'm confused, sorry, I'm assessing it as a lot on,
By itself?
yes.
Okay. Now, your first lot, and there were 2 sales on it, do you know anything about those sales?
No, I didn't look into who purchased or.
So you can see that on our page 3 that the traffic count is 50,700, which is almost twice as much as the Pembina Highway on ours, which is still on a side street. So there is a big difference, is there not?
So, is it on page 2?
Or our page 3,
Or page
sorry, 4. Well, wait, yeah.
there?
1, 2, 3, 4, never mind, 4.
Okay, and which, is there not none? So are we looking at comparable?
This is your comparable number 1 and 2.
Okay. And we're looking at this, did you say the size?
Well, I'm looking at the traffic counts,
Okay, yeah.
and on that one, it's significantly higher than Pembina frontage near the subject, correct?
That one, yeah, it's 50,000 and in front of the subject to be 31.
And in this is the advertising for it. They did a calculation of area demographics on a 3-kilometer radius. Are you familiar with this style of real estate analysis for development?
I've seen something like this before.
Like they draw a 3-kilometer ring around and establish the households, and they say that if we're retail, we're going to draw from this. Now, if you drew a 3-kilometer ring around the subject, wouldn't you get into farmers' fields?
Well, it's mostly development, it's Fort Richmond. It's, one side is Richmond West, which is housing, and then the other side's Fort Richmond, so.
But 3 kilometers brings you well past St. Norbert, does it not? Into the fields?
If I had I'd have to look at a map. I wouldn't assume that 3 kilometers would be outside the city from the subject property location.
On the next comparable number 3, that's the Montcalm Hotel redevelopment, is that correct?
Mm-hmm, yes.
And getting back to the question of single family, this site, do you think that this site would want to relocate would like to be located near a rail line?
Probably not.
Matter of fact, wouldn't this site benefit from its proximity to the Victoria Hospital and the university?
Well, this site is, like I said, my comparables are superior to what.
Okay, and then you
the
said
subject
that, I know,
property is.
I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to qualify as to how superior they are. And the last site on St. Mary's, which we've identified as a super loop, that's 2 blocks from St. Health Center, correct?
Yes, it is.
So in summation, you did say that they're all superior.
Yes.
And how did you make the adjustment from their superiority to the subject's lack of it and lack of frontage?
Well, the number that the square foot, like the $31.37 was from the model. I didn't come up
Oh,
with
okay,
this exact value.
so the model said we put all that in.
Yes, we have.
Okay, those are my questions, thank you.
Okay, Lynn, any questions?
Just had a question about the zoning. What is the C2 zoning permit? What does the zoning permit, what sort of development? It's an empty lot right now.
It could permit a commercial building, and then there would just be certain parameters that would have to.
Does that include residential, like condo development or apartment, or would that have to be an application or?
It might be for multi, but I'm unsure, like, I would assume it would just be more of a retail office.
Okay. And there was a question raised about the lease, and so you don't know the basis of how that lease was established?
I do not know.
Okay, thank you so much.
Jerry?
Thank you. This property is owned by the city of Winnipeg
Yes, it is.
and is leased to whom?
The property that is on Pembina Highway, so there's, I don't even know if we have it in our, I don't think it comes up on my brief for who the owner is.
What is it used for? Just overflow parking?
I'm guessing that from what I can tell from the photos, it's used for overflow parking, and they must need it, I'm assuming, for their business.
They don't, no, there's no parking rentals or revenue.
I'm unsure, because there's no mail, I
Okay.
need the mail or anything.
The whole pile of parking area for whatever the business is there, so just wondered, the ratio of parking compared to the size of business operation,
Yeah, I have
seems
no-
out of proportion.
I have no data on if they were charging or who's specifically using it.
What 100 block would that be on Pembina Highway, if you have any idea? What 100 block of?
It's closer to my comparable, comparable 3, so it's around, I think it's 2,000, 3,000, kind of, it's past the Victoria Hospital.
Right.
I can remember. Yeah, on your way out of the city towards the perimeter.
Yeah, it's far out, fairly far out.
Yeah, it's,
Okay. All right, thank you. That's my question.
Okay, it's already been sort of touched on, but it appears that there's a Smitty's restaurant on the corner. Do you know that, is it Smitty's that's leasing this for their parking?
well, it is more of a strip mall, so
So it's a
there's
strip mall.
there's more businesses there.
So it's a
Yes.
strip mall that's leasing it, not just the...
Not just the schools, from what I know.
All right, that was my question, so you can proceed.
Thank you. This property is leased from the city of Winnipeg by the owner of the strip mall, and the reasons for it are when the site was first developed, the parking was adequate for a certain number of uses, but Smitty's did have an expansion, and with expansion, zoning requires more parking, and the city made this available and leased it to my client. It's overflow, and it's, I mean, they use maybe a third of it, as you can see from the pictures. The rent is based on, and this is, page 2, is their lease. So $15 per stall for 77 stalls with a 1% increase. And this was done by PP&D. Now, procedure within the city of Winnipeg on lease of properties is, there are policies on it, and it has to go through committees and get approved. This is a very unusable piece of land because it's adjacent to the rail and it's on a side street, not a feeder street. It's not on a main artery. And it would never be developed, and I'll show you the reasons why. So, but getting back to the rent, the standard policy, and I get involved with a lot of these, is when the city puts a piece of land up for lease or sale, the first job is to have to commission an appraisal. Now, I don't do those appraisals because I never worked for the city, but other firms do. They take the appraisal, they review it, and then they generally establish a rental rate based on an anticipated return. And that varies between 6 and 10%. We'll just take the appraised value and put a rate between 6 and 10% on it. Now, in special circumstances, they may be a bit more critical. I know one piece of land on Chester near the Tyne Tees old landfill site, which has got a better rate on it, but it's also in a very strangely sized piece of land with an environmental problem. There are no such issues here. The major impediment is the rail line. Now, the rail line, in C2 zoning or in any zoning, the city has not yet established the setbacks that are to be applied. But on page 13, this is what is being adopted across Canada, and it's the people pushing for this, of course, are the rail lines, because they'd like to see separations established by zoning, because has been building up to their lines. And the rural municipalities are adopting this, and the point is, no one wants to be that close to a rail line anyway, so this is just common sense. So the setback that they're looking for is, and this is a principal main line, is 30 meters, roughly 100 feet. So on our page,
This is the Letelier subdivision, isn't it?
this is the Letelier CN line, yeah.
Yeah, is that the principal main line? or
That's
is
the
that
main line, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The main line to the United States.
That's correct. And on page 16, what we've done is we've drawn a line that's 100 meters and shown you how much of it is impacted by the amount. And you know what? I think that's drawn wrong. It should be larger because we don't do diagonal lines, we do perpendicular lines. In any event, I think the message is clear that we do have some that's impacted. But aside from that, we also have the city's own private access bylaw. And there is some question whether or not they'd actually get access to it, because the current access to this is from the neighboring property. There is no legal access to it. And I think the assessors are actually, my picture, page 1 shows it. You can see that there's an access cut on Kirkbridge that services 2835 Pembina, and in order to get to this lot, it has no access of its own. That little pad is a bus stop. So there's also no legal access to the site, and I'm sure that had an impact on PP&D's decision on the rental rate. Well, so what we did is and I didn't want to present cap rate information because I don't necessarily agree with it, but we do have a number of decisions that we're showing you for parking lots and the city's parameters, and they're using 5 to 6%, and we've applied it at 6% cap rate on the net income without concept of vacancy. It's just pure income. That gives us a value of $231,000. Now, as a test for reasonableness, we also have some sales that we're focusing on that are impacted by usage, adjacent usages. And I agree that some of these are a little further away, but further down Pembina Highway, on the same CN L'Atelier line, we have a number of sales, numbers 1 and 2. And you can see that they're marked out.
What page are you
I'm on page 6 and 7. And, sorry, 6, 7, and 8. I thought you were correcting me. These 3 sales do back onto the CN L'Atelier line, and the achieved sale prices on them do indicate support for the sales we used. I think we were looking at $8.89 a square foot, $6.16 a square foot, and the number we had put on this at 231,000 for 27,000 feet is about $8 a foot. So they support that. Impacted sites. The other impacted site was the one that backed onto the river, and that's on page 9. That's at 10. Those are of lesser reliability for this, but they also indicate a lack of usable land. Now, in future development for these, numbers 3, 4, and 5 were sold for multifamily development. In C2 zoning, you can get, if there's an equivalency to an RM rating for multiple family, and it's an administrative approval, so you don't have to go to get approval from a committee. It's generally an automatic approval in C2 to build multifamily, and it relates to CMF M, I believe. Oh, I might even put that in my brief here, on page 12. Yeah, right here on page 12. This is from the city zoning. Multifamily structures in C2 must meet the requirements of RMFM zoning. So it is a permitted usage, and there's an equivalency test. So, I mean, the assessor had a multifamily project in one of her comps, Superior site, and I think we've given you a few in sites that are impacted by rearage issues. The first 2 sites that we brought on, number 2 was developed multifamily. I take that back. There's a setback from the rail. Number 1, to my knowledge, is going to be used for accessory parking for the strip malls in front. So we have the 2 approaches, and in this case, I think the real issue here is we have the city's own department have a value on it. And whatever rate you want to apply to it, you want to apply a 5% rate to a 10% rate, they're only getting $13,000 in rent. So that's what the city thinks it's worth, PP&D, who we know, I don't have a copy of the appraisal because I'm not allowed to get it. But we know due to policy would have done that. So I think the assessment department is out of step, and they should have researched this first before assessing it. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Any questions?
There's some rebuttal evidence in regards to comparable 1.
Okay. Okay.
So for comparable 1, you have 1025 Distrib, I can't say it, sorry. And that roll number you used under the parcel detail actually is a different property.
Yeah, it was.
So the property I
yeah.
have at the bottom here is actually the property that sold for $130. It's in St. Norbert, and it's a smaller lot. Like the one in the picture on comparable 1 is a much larger lot, and those were sold separately and then replotted. So the first picture here is the first sale of behind the rail line. And there was nothing involved with Pembina Highway, and then the actual current lot isn't on Pembina Highway, I just wanted to point out.
I don't disagree with you, there is some confusion on those sales. There was a party out to try to assemble them, and there were a variety of different actors involved in it. No, your point's well taken.
And then for comparable to, did that one sell as vacant agricultural before it was developed into multifamily?
I think that was the department's code on it, but it was zoned for its usage.
And it is a bigger lot, about double the size?
Correct, but it also has Pembina Highway access.
Yes, just farther down.
Yeah, and then that's, what I was looking at was for some support for, this is probably more rebuttal than anything else, to show some support for Pembina lots that are impacted by rail, is that they sell for substantially less than Pembina lots that have no rail influence. We really couldn't find any off Pembina sales, which is what we really should have been looking for, is to try to see it, because what's happened on Pembina is that if you're not backing onto the rail line, the minute you leave Pembina, you get into a residential zoning, and you're not getting C-zone land, and the only places there are where the rail line occurs. But generally, those people own all the land between Pembina and the rail. This is one of the rare occasions where we found a freestanding lot, the one being assessed, that is.
And then comparable 3 is also much bigger than the subject.
Absolutely, yes.
Comparable 4 is about double the size. And then for comparable 5, I would say it's pretty irregular shaped and not really comparable.
Well, comparable 5, one of the issues with that is that you can see that their boundary extended past the water line, and they did own that land. But because it went multifamily, what they were really buying was the development permissibility. So the total lot being 0.34 acres, this allows them to develop on the RMF, on the applicable RMF standard, including the water. So it gets them a higher density for their actual land. And when people buy RM land, that's really what they're looking for, is the density above the actual configuration. And this was sold in conjunction with another one.
The parcel to the north, which
Yes,
is very
that's-
small.
That's correct.
Narrow.
Yes.
And then on your page 16, you did state that the setback from the rail. So the setback from the rail is, you have the top here, 30, is it?
Well, it's a 30-meter setback, and as I mentioned, that line's drawn at an angle. It should be drawn perpendicular, and it would actually go a little bit deeper.
So even if you did take off a setback, the lot would still be over 15,000 square feet, give or take, which could be developable if the city sold it.
Well, then you have to get an access, which isn't there. And then you have to apply for one. And remember, there's access setbacks from, one of the issues, if you take a look at it, is there's an existing property, and so you have to have a setback from the adjacent property, a setback from the rail line, and then you gotta move the bus stop. And, it's likely they could probably put an access roughly in the center. It hasn't been approved yet, though. And so you can't, when you value things that haven't been approved, it's a critical assumption to development, which impacts the price because you're introducing risk levels. And then who is on off Pembina? That's the other problem.
And And then my last question is just, so you have some parking comparables from our department on pages.
We're not relying on one for the parking, we're just looking and showing a history of how how the city's treated parking lots. Because they're in different areas.
The way you determine your value is just going with the lease exactly, not looking at the market, and then just applying the capitalization.
Well, the parking lots, they show that the city assesses parking lots on stall counts, rents, and cap rates. And we've taken the same approach because the lease establishes that that's the legal use. And the city is renting it on the premise that it's a parking lot, not for any reason. They're not renting it so someone can develop it. So the main issue here is we have a legal registration of the lease on the property which impacts the use. It's leased as a parking lot, it gets valued as such, and the city has a procedure.
Okay, so all you did though was just use the leased value for the rent, you didn't look at all to the market, it's just going off the lease.
Well, understanding that, that's correct, and understanding that there's a process in PP&D for establishing those values.
Okay, that's all my questions, thank you.
Okay, Jerry, any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Lynn?
No questions, no.
Okay, so you're basically arguing the highest best use is the parking lot.
That's correct, because of lack of access, assemblage, location off Pembina, and the fact that the city has put a lease on it with, and there is a registration on title of the lease, so that now we're dealing with a property right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and, all right, I have no further questions then. All right, let's do 18, since and then only things that are different from the previous. So you can proceed on the 18 valuation.
So file number 18-716, roll number 0309 299 9210. Again, the land area is 27,797 square feet. We already went over most of it. My comparables on page 3 are still the same, and my recommendation is to maintain the 2018 assessed value of $806,000 based on $29 a square foot. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Okay, any questions?
Just one question is these were generated by the model, is that correct?
Yes, the rate per square foot.
So there was no evidence brought forward on substantiation of the time change?
Well, the comparables, those were the comparables I thought were most similar to the subject property. The model could have some I didn't catch that caused it to go down by, I think it dropped by $2.
But the model doesn't take into account, doesn't investigate the reasons for the changes in value, does it? I mean, because you have two properties that are the same one that resold for later. The model doesn't investigate why that happened, it just accepts that it happens and says there's a market increase. Is that fair to say?
If they were included for analysis, and we review the sales to make sure they're,
And I asked you earlier if you were aware of the different motivations in each sale. And the first one, were you aware that it was a Shell station and the environmental hadn't been done on it?
for my comparable,
Yes, comparable your sale number one.
I was not aware it was a gas station.
And you did investigate whether or not the environmental had been completed for the second sale, thereby providing some, a bump in value for a clean site. You did not investigate that, did you?
I was not.
Those are my questions sometimes.
Okay, any questions, Lynn?
What value are you seeking for 2018?
Oh, the city.
Oh, sorry.
It's the city's turn.
No? Okay, then I have no questions.
Okay, Jerry?
I have no questions.
Okay, neither do I, so, again, anything that's different?
Nothing is different, it's the same value, it's impacted by the same lease. I should mention that in your package I gave you, 2015 renewal, it was the same rate for the prior period. So we're looking for the same value.
Okay, I was gonna ask you about the escalator that was in
The
there.
escalator kicks in for 2016, 1%. I think a 1% difference, that's $100. Wow, okay.
All right. Any questions that haven't been asked?
Just so you didn't apply, I know it's only $138, but you're just gonna keep the same value?
Yeah,
Continue?
well, we're of course open to an adjustment of $130 on the rent, which is
Are you capped out at
$2,000
$2,000?
on the income, on the total value. I don't think it makes much difference.
Compared to the overall difference between the parties?
I
Anything
just think
else?
it's a font release, but that's all my questions.
Okay, anything, Lynn, Jerry?
No?
All right, thank you for that. Then we will take a brief break and then we'll move on to Rothwell Road.
Maybe.
Okay, we'll come back to order. We'll deal with 15 Rothwell Road, so we have 2 years, 2017 and 18, and both
You're gonna start with
realty and
realty first, and,
Yeah.
because that'll expedite,
We
okay?
can pretty much follow the, like,
Yeah,
we'll go over our comps
yeah.
during realty, I
Yeah,
think.
I would certainly like to entertain a different argument for ARV
The
than
only
we did
thing
for
is,
realty.
air conditioning, we'll briefly just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I'll adjust that, so.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start with 2017 on 15 Rothwell.
Okay, so file number 18-729, roll number 10006776065. So this is the new, a new building. It was added in 2017. The gross area is 18,933 square feet. It is a CMBSR, vehicle service related. So for the permit, the declared construction value for total permits was $4,390,000. If you turn to page 1, I just have an aerial photo of the subject property. So it has access off Rockwell Road and just faces Keniston Boulevard. If you turn to page 3, you can just see some more aerial shots of the property. Page 4, I just have some exterior photos of the building. Page 5 is just a few interior photos I have. And, page 6, I just have the, there's the floor plan and then just the property. So it's 2 stories. There's the main floor and then a mezzanine on the second, so it's not a full second story. Page 7, I just have, there's no sale history, no subject property leases, it's owner occupied. No mailer information, because again, it's new. So page 8 is my comparables. I have 8 comparables which are similar vehicle service garages. So my comparables 1 to 3 are my newest comparables in regards to when they were built. My comparables range in square footage from, just over 4,000 square feet to 24,000 square feet. The net per square foot rate ranges from $13.28 to $25.17. The average is $18.27 per square foot. I would say this property is more similar to the ones that are the newer builds, for comparables 1, 2, and 3. If you turn to page 9, I just have the income stream that shows the $13. We applied rent of $13.75 to the 18,933 square feet. We have the overall capitalization rate of 7.5%, to give the estimated value of $3,010,000. If you turn to page 10, it's just the income value summary. Page 11 is just our capitalization rates generated by our model. And page 12 is just some Municipal Assessment Act information. And then my recommendation for this property is to maintain the 2017 assessed value of $3,010,000. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Questions?
Yes, the rent rates that you used are the same in both groups, correct?
I think I just added one more that was a newer one,
Oh.
2018. It was a lower, I added it because it's 2015 start date.
That's
It was
9/7.
comparable 8.
Okay,
I just added that one in.
I'm just trying to speed it.
But pretty much the same comparables. I would again say comparables 1 to 3 are the newest ones. Probably
Okay.
most of
And in these comparables, are you able to provide us who the tenant is?
I think there's some Cal tires, there's Midas
You
mufflers.
don't mind one by one?
Oh, one by one, go through each one. So the first one is Cal Tire. Comparable 2 is Cal Tire. Comparable 3 is MPI. Comparable 4 is Car Star Collision. Comparable 5 is Midas. Comparable 6 is Cal Tire, and then 7 and 8 are Fountain Tires. So just-
And I'll just save time later, comparable number 8 in the next one at 970 Portage.
Oh, yes, that's just the only change in my comparables for 2018 grade.
Just with the board's indulgence, I want to speed things up here. So who's in that?
That one would be, I think it was Minute Muffler,
Okay.
and that one was just the newest lease we had, so I added it in from 2015 start.
So basically in your comparables, you have one auto body shop, correct? Only one of them is an auto body shop?
Well, they're all vehicle service
No,
related.
but it's one, only one is an auto body shop, correct?
I'm unsure, I've never been to it.
Well, Cal Tire's a tire shop, MPI, we know what they are, Midas is mufflers, Fountain are tires. So that leaves comparable number 4, Car Star. Now, to my
But
knowledge,
they do work on cars.
that's a body shop, so fair to say that only one of your comparables is a body shop?
I'm not sure all what Midas Muffler does, but if.
They don't do body work.
Okay, then I would guess then yes, if comparable 4 would be the only one.
Now, in the style and usage of these properties, aren't these all multi-bay sites? Where they have a wide building that, with multiple bays that you drive in? I'm thinking of the Cal Tires, for example, and the Fountain
So you're
Tires.
thinking of like a long
And
horizontal
Midas.
building?
Yeah, they're wide, shallow, and they all have multiple doors where you would drive a single bay in, correct?
I'm not sure, I'd have to look at what each, or why I didn't include pictures, I should.
Well, I've got pictures of them all, and do you want me to hand them out now?
If it's rebuttal,
Yeah, well, it'll help, if it helps you with your answers, that's all I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, how come I've only got 5? Oh, 6, there we go.
Will this be the same for?
Yeah, it'd be the same for both, yes.
Thank you.
So actually, I have pictures of all of the comparables, including one for 2018. And so I'll ask you again, just looking at the picture, with the exception of MPI and comparable number 4 and Chevrolet, aren't these all wide, shallow properties with a lot of service space, drive-in service space?
yes, it looked like, again, the Cal Tire has like front reception areas, but they do have bays, yes.
No, 7 would I count.
Pardon?
I count 7.
Kevin, comparable 7, I'm not sure.
No, I count 7,
Oh.
7 service space.
Okay.
Now, did you investigate whether any of these had basement storage?
I would assume none of them had basement storage.
You're assuming now, I know for a fact, because I've been
Yeah.
down there, comparable number 6 has basement storage, and that's Cal Tire's policy, that they have basement storage so clients can store their winter tires or summer tires in off-season.
Okay.
Now, did that come into account? The subject doesn't have a basement storage facility, does it?
No.
So would that be a factor in the rent?
Well, I don't know the leases, like, or the full details of the lease, but from what we understand, they're leased at the main floor, and then the rate applied is that they, like, the
Correct.
basement isn't included in this space when they,
I agree with you, because I've actually arbitrated some of these properties, and I know that to be the fact, but they do have the additional usage of a basement, which is of some value to somebody, right?
okay.
So if you're using properties that have the use of this basement, would you not consider that there should be some adjustment required for that? And let me speak specifically to 340 Penman, because I've been in there and I know there's a basement. And I agree with you, 5571 square feet is the main floor at a rate of $13.28 with a full basement. Now, you have this in your lease. You're getting the use of it. Would you not consider that the $13 rate may have some adjustments for a superior access to a basement?
I guess if the space is considered leasable, and they want, like, is it leasable basement space?
It's an amenity. They have an additional amenity of a
Well, I'm
basement.
assuming they factored somewhat of it in if it's,
I did the arbitration, I know they did, but I'm just wondering if you were aware, or if you had done any adjustments on it. I can't tell you about my experience.
I was unaware
Especially-
there was any sort of leasable basement space because we do not count.
Now, comparable number 3, which is an MPI site, were you familiar with the tendering process on MPI?
No, I'm not aware of the tendering.
So it's fair to say that they do employ a tendering process, which is a bit different than the free market purchase or lease acquisition done by private business. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure.
Well, for example, they specify, many of us have been in MPI buildings. They specify specific air handling units. They actually allow their clients to drive into the facility and therefore have have it built up for that. They allow new drivers to drive into it. This isn't something that the body shop would allow, would they? They allow people to stand in their area, which means it's fit for human occupancy, which means superior air handling. This isn't something the body shop does, do they?
I never took into account
Okay.
air handling to the
What
market
about-
rents.
What about zoning?
Um,
You are aware that a body shop is a restricted usage
I would assume all these would have some sort of restricted use.
for the air handling
Well,
having
not
to do with
for-
paint booths?
I'm not aware if any of these have paint booths, and I don't know. But I assume that all this would be factored into the market rents that they're paying.
Well, then what about zoning?
Then I'm assuming what they're paying is applicable to what,
Aren't all of yours, with the exception of comparable number 4, in commercial zoned areas, and our subject is in an industrial area?
it's an industrial?
That's correct. Our subject is located in an industrial zone,
M2.
right? And now your comparables, with the exception of one in Chevrolet, they're all in C zones. Most are C2 or C3, correct?
Okay.
So there is a difference in the use that can be done in those zones? And would you consider that the market would provide a more competitive rental rate in a more permissive zoning?
Well, what I was choosing my comparables based on was just car service related, not based on zoning.
Is not the primary primary focus of valuation, the primary object being appraised or assessed in any assignment are the legal rights, are they not? That's a principle of valuation. And I apologize, I'm not trying to attack in your knowledge, your education in any way whatsoever, but are you aware that the primary issue that any evaluator looks at are the property rights first and foremost?
Yes.
Okay. And one of those rights is the zoning that's established on property. So that would then come before who's in there, would it not?
Yes, so you're saying that this should be, the market rent should be for an industrial, is that what you're?
Well, I'm saying you're first and foremost, aren't you supposed to look at the property rights is my only question. And your comparables are in C zone, with the exception of one, and our subject is in M zone, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's as far as I'm just gonna go with it. Did you have a chance to inspect the property?
No, I did not.
Now, did you investigate any of the leases on these properties, or where did your information come from?
It's from our comparables at work they've been analyzed through our Mailers?
for mailers.
Yes.
Now, I'm still waiting my response, but comparable number 4 and I share some, a service provider, and my understanding is that this is an owner-occupied property. Would you have any information that could verify that it was a tenanted property?
If it was owner, well, the person who reviewed it said it was a tenant property. If it were to be an owner-occupied property, I wouldn't have used it.
But you
So
don't
someone
have,
else verified.
you don't have that with you, do you?
No.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, because I was looking for these, on page 2 and 3, you have aerial photos.
Yes.
Where did these come from?
From our program at work. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because your city website hasn't updated this past vacant land on the IMAP system. So this is a different system?
I'm assuming so.
Okay. I tell you, really, I was looking for it to show the absence of air conditioning compressors, and but we were agreeing on it, but I couldn't find this picture. That's
Oh, okay.
And who took these photos then on page 5?
They were just from the website.
Okay, so that's not Mr. Sneezeby's car in there.
Not that good a shape.
And this property is located adjacent to the dealership, and they're owned by the same party, is that correct? Businesses?
I didn't look at the owner of the adjacent property, but I would assume if they're both Mercedes-Benz.
Okay. So, okay. Now, given that, and I'll tell you that they are the same ownership, and I think we went through this already there was a questioning of my right to appeal, and I thought that this was all verified, that they are indeed the same. Oh, no, sorry, I was dealing with Svetlana on the business tax and the taxable party, and I thought that it was clear to the assessor that it is the same entity as next door.
I just wasn't gonna speak to it. It's not the property, the subject property we're dealing with, so I didn't.
Well, given that it is one economic unit, had the assessor given any thought to treating it as one economic unit in valuation?
Well, they're separate buildings we're valuing, separate parcels of land. If the owner wanted to merge them, they could request, I think, a merge, but that would have to be reviewed.
Okay, but so that's an administrative function of a merge. I'm thinking of an application function, which is valuation, where in valuation, you can deem that even though you have two titled lots, but they're a part of the same entity, that they should be valued as one. Was there any?
Well, there's different parcel use, like this one's a vehicle service related and the other one is a dealership,
Right.
so.
So it's an administrative issue that there was no consideration given to it.
Well, we would never normally combine the both of them together and value them as one. Like, are you talking about combining square feet and just applying one rate?
I'm just looking at the valuation process, because there are other dealerships where that has been done, although they are on one title, right?
Yeah,
And there's,
I've never dealt with one that was, like, personally.
with a separate title, so it's a separate title, the administration says separate assessment or separate valuation method. Whereas their competitor down the street could be on one title with a body shop and a showroom.
Is the body shop attached to the building?
No. I'll just give you an example. Vicar Chevrolet, 7 acres of land, body shop, showroom, garage, all in one title. So they're valued as one, but their competitor, Mercedes, has two, and they're valued as two separate entities. And that's an administrative function?
Again, I don't know anything about like, I don't know if they're separate buildings, why they were put together. This is how we did this one, because this is.
It was just about the theory
Property, yeah.
behind the valuation, is that there are some that are valued as one economic unit with all their pieces in one assessment, and then there are others, like this one, that are two separate pieces.
Well, the majority of this building is a service garage. The majority of the dealership doesn't have the same I guess, quality would be different.
I was just looking at the comparative method of valuation, that's all. Thank you for that. Other than that, so the valuation on page 9, was this all model driven?
This is all model driven.
Now, was this the original model from 2016 reassessment then? You made no changes to it based on board decisions that came after the fact?
It was 16, the building wasn't added for 16, so. it would
Well,
be
I meant
different.
for the 2016 general reassessment, which is the 2014 reference year.
Yes. So
Now-
this, if it would have been added in 16, I'm assuming the model would have
No.
generated the same rate.
That's not my question. My question is, was the model altered to take into account board decisions that occurred after the model was released? For example, we had numerous body shops where they dropped the rental rates and they increased the capitalization rate as the result of decisions. Does the model reflect those changes, or are you just reapplying the original model?
I can't speak to anything that is done at the model. I don't.
So you don't know if this is going back to the original model, not reflecting subsequent decisions.
I would just, we reassess and we look at all the data. We don't base.
But you don't alter your model?
Again, I can't speak to, I don't work in that department.
So you-
I'm here defending the value for this.
The answer would be you don't know if the model was adjusted to reflect board decisions.
I have no information.
Okay. And, where does this fit in your capitalization rate study? Into which category has it been placed?
So this is the 7.5% cap.
That's on page 11.
I would assume it would be through an office. This is considered an office property for a department, and it would be,
Office?
well, that's the section I work for.
Oh,
Like, there's no specific one here for vehicle service related.
well, okay, I'm just wondering, does your model on page 7, or, I already lost the page here, your evaluation, page 9, it indicates, for example, VSG, and then tenant class, but it doesn't specify where the cap rate came from. So where does the model pull its vehicle service garage caps from?
I would just,
Not industrial. You're saying maybe office?
I would assume since this is an office related property through our section, that it would be pulled from our low high of between the 5.75 and 9.25. I'm unsure.
Okay. But it, of course, is not an office, is it?
There's an office,
It's not an office.
or a
It's-
small
it's-
office
it's-
portion, but it's a vehicle service related
It's a body
property.
shop. Right, okay. Those are my questions, thanks.
Okay, Jerry, any questions?
No.
I thought you couldn't ask why they couldn't fix your car.
Cost.
Let me ask on your comparables. If a property was built for a particular leaseor, does that, in your opinion, still constitute an arm's length lease?
If it was built for something specific,
Well, I'm thinking, I am familiar with the Cal Tire on McPhillips, since I live by there.
Okay.
That was a gas station that went out of business, and then they had to do necessary remedial work, and then it was built to be a Cal Tire. I was unaware that it was separately owned. I thought it would be owner operated or something like that, but whoever built it purposely to be a Cal Tire. So does that constitute a true arm's length lease then?
Again, are you, like the tenant requested to be built, and they built it to,
Yeah, if they built it to spec for a leaseholder.
I'm unsure if that was what happened, or so I can't speak to
Yeah,
that.
I can't swear
yeah,
for sure
I-
that's what happened, I just know that.
What I assume is that one was just a market rent.
Yeah.
The information we have available to us.
Yeah, it was built new as a Cal Tire.
Yeah.
Okay, I have no other questions, so you can proceed, Mr. Newfeld.
Thank you. I'm gonna probably slip back and forth, just because the 2 years, and I'll expedite them the following year. What we've done both years is really tried to follow the decisions that have been made at the board. We're not trying to look for a brand new value, that we are following them. Whether we agree with them or not, there were a number of decisions on automotive-related properties, and both parties had the option of appealing them, and they didn't, and it's a review of case law, and but we're also gonna look at the market as well. Now, on this site, it was built to suit for Mercedes for their body shop. The specifications were set out by corporate, and the costs to construct included image to meet the Mercedes standards, as well as equipment and the capability, the infrastructure for the equipment. So we're not looking at cost as being anything close to reliable. It's not. Little things like having a drive-through area for estimating. It's Mercedes specification. Never seen a body shop with one. That's just an example. Modern paint booths with the air handling equipment. This property, this user, by the way, is one of only, I gotta get this right, because I have a car that I need to get some very intricate painting done. And it's one of only 2 body shops in the city that will do specialized painting for certain types of cars, where the bonding is different. My particular car has a aluminum body with a white undercoating, and the method of the paint application is proprietary. So they have this equipment because Mercedes has this equipment. So this was incorporated in the original cost. So we're not looking at cost, we're looking at market. And on page 1, we have our valuation, and although I questioned the assessor and the cap rate, we knew that most of the caps that were applied were in the 7.5% to 8% range for this type of property, so we're not going to challenge that, we're going to accept it. But we do not accept the rental rate. And going to page 7, we have a number of, this is what I mentioned, we have rents, and then, and by the way, some of this is post-reference, and I'll have to clarify some of these. They were, with the exception of, page 7, with the exception of Marion, they were all the same rents that were in place. This was written, sorry, we should have given you the start dates on these, but these were in place in 2014 and in 2016, whereas Marion was the only one that was applied bit later on. So all of these are body shops, and we have pictures of all of them. First one is an inferior site on Dudley at 815, and then a King Edward, which is a superior site and a redeveloped one at 842. 84 Scurfield, I think this one actually dates from 2012. It was the start date on this, in effect for 14 and 16. This was a egg hatchery, corner Scurfield and Dovercourt, and Boyd are leasing it, and it was redone for their body shop, so a modern body shop. 874 Marion was a body shop that was expanded. Ownership is have some related parties to the operators. They're not identical, and I'm involved with them, so I'm comfortable that they're arm's length enough to establish that the rental rate of $720 is fair, and that's a 30,000 square foot body shop, of which I think 2/3 of it dates from the 80s, and a third of it is new. We actually had it on a 2017 supplemental, and so that's the rental rate, $720. The 700 Morey is another body shop, and it's actually owned by the same parties as Marion. However, there the tenant is, and ownership are not related whatsoever. So what I was looking for were specifically body shops that are rented, and they don't generally come on the market as rented. Boyd has a number because of the nature of their ownership. They've gone to being an income trust, and as a result, they're to maximize a yield for their shareholders, they've been moving more and more to rented locations. They have another rent, which I didn't report, which is the one on Southwood, old Southwood Chevrolet site on Pembina Highway, which is a bit higher, but I know that there's some percentages involved, and it's basically a retail site. On the bottom of page 7, these are properties that I was involved with. They're a mix of body shops and with the addition of the adjacent car dealership, and stated there where the whether or not these decisions were appealed, and where it says appealed, that was by me. 23 Rothwell is the Mercedes dealership, and in 2016 the rent on it for the dealership was $13.24, which I appealed. Now if you scroll down a bit, in the 2018 value, the rent was applied at $10.60. Neither party appealed that. You can see it was originally at $12.45. So there are some decisions out there, and that's why I was asking the assessor questions. Stapleton, I'm moving back up to Stapleton. That's a body shop. That's the one for Focus Hyundai. 626. 80 Weston is an independent body shop, and this is an applied rate. 964 Region, which I did bring up in my questioning. This is Vicker Chevrolet's body shop only. So they have 21,000 feet. That was assessed at $950 a square foot in 2016. So there were decisions. You can see it came down from $1160. And this is a body shop, a modern body shop. The first part was built in 1997. I think their addition was placed in 2014, where they doubled the size of it. At the bottom of the page is the 2018 ruling, which was also will be a supplemental coming on that because they expanded their car dealership. But aside from that, you can see that these were the applied rates of competition. 874 Marion was, the assessor put a rate on it for brand new construction of $10.32. So this is competition for the subject, and which we filed an appeal on at $10.32. And then again, we have the other rates as well. So as I mentioned, there are body shop rents, and there have been decisions, and for the subject, we put a rate at the higher end of the range on it, at $10 a square foot, supported by that. And the difference, sorry, I just wanted to double check something here. You'll note that we've used different vacancy and shortfall rates from the assessor. We've used lower numbers. We've used the industrial rate. Because the body shop is more of an industrial building than it is of anything else. And it is located in an industrial neighborhood. And if you look at the zoning on page 18, the bottom of the page, I was asking the assessor earlier about auto approved usages, and you can see that they are permitted. Auto, light truck, motorcycle sales and service, repair and service permitted in C2 to C4 and also in all the industrial zones. But there's an asterisk beside it which indicates site-specific standards. And those site-specific standards deal with setbacks required for lighting, screening, and in case there are air handling equipment located near the neighbor's site. And air handling equipment, with the new paint booths, there's a lot less noxious emissions than in the past. In the old days, it was a real direct flow, so if you had a paint booth and you're living beside a body shop, whenever they decided to paint, you got the noxious odor, and it was potentially hazardous. The new booths don't do that. So it's been a bit lighter on it, but you're still not going to get guaranteed civic approval. That's my point. No body shops are being allowed anywhere near residential sites because they do have to go through committee. So they are forced to be in the industrial neighborhood. Yes, oh, and there was one other point I was going to make on that. You'll note that that's for auto, light truck, and then it says above it, private motor vehicle related. One of the reasons Mercedes moved to an M zoning from, it used to be on Portage Avenue in the C-zoned area. Well, they had two reasons for moving. They lack the size, but they also have a truck line. So they sell the Mercedes truck and repair the Mercedes truck. And if you look at page 19, under principal use tables and under industrial uses, that then moves to the heavy equipment sales and also fleet services. So you'll notice under fleet services, zoning was changed to conditional, and under heavy, it's not permitted in C, where and you have to go to M2 to get a permission. So this site, the dealership next door sells trucks, not light trucks, heavy trucks qualified as, and the body shop repairs them. And that was one of the reasons, as I mentioned, I've dealt with Mercedes since 1996, and I'm very familiar with their operation. So to sum up, what we have here is we should be looking at body shop rents. We have to consider that the usage is an industrial-based usage because of what they do. And point out on the assessor's page 2, photograph, the aerial photograph, those are trucks. And page 3 shows them as well from a different angle. Those aren't light trucks. They qualify as heavy trucks. They're diesel powered with gross vehicle weights for industrial use.
They're not vans, are they?
They're not the Sprinter.
They're a
van.
combination of the vans and yeah, they're mostly all van related, but there are some chassis conversion ones as well. But they're not light trucks.
Okay.
When you go over 8 passengers, you move from light truck, SUV, or whatever, to a different category.
Okay.
Is that your presentation?
That's it.
Questions?
Yes. So the trucks, are they like the vehicle Sprinter vans that take people like the hotel shuttles or any sort of, like, are they shuttle vehicles?
No, well, the Sprinter and the chassis upwards are all generally they can come in two types of package. One is a pre-manufactured, and then the other is a more of a customized shell. And what's they sell more of are the joggers bands. So if you're an electrician or a plumber, you'll notice that more of them are driving Mercedes these days because they're offering a good gross vehicle weight. They're off the option of all-wheel drive, high cube space, and they're fitted out usually with an insulated back and rear cargo, side cargo. So they're outside light truck or pickup trucks, right?
For the rental rates applied by the assessment department, are we not supposed, we're not comparing assessments like this isn't evidence? Would they say, like,
No, and that's a good point.
we don't really know what happened at each one of these hearings
Well, I
to
do.
even look at the board rates?
But I do because I was there.
Yes, but the board doesn't know if they weren't there.
I
So we can't really take that into consideration as evidence, though.
What we can
They're
take
not
into
marked.
consideration is that we have a board who has sat through these hearings, because they've all been around a while, and know that the service garages and the body shops were adjusted. And the assessment came out with, just, you went right back to the model. You didn't learn your lesson that the board was trying to tell you. Not you personally, but you didn't learn your lesson, and that's my point. The board's ruled on it. So we have to give them some deference.
But these aren't leases.
No, but the leases above support the rates. It's argument rather than evidence.
Okay, and then for your leases, are any of the leases built after 2000?
Yes, as I mentioned, Marion was
renovated.
it was fairly new to begin with, and an addition was placed on it, and 84 Skirfield was a building from the 80s that was, it was a hatchery, and I toured it when it went up for sale, and I actually appraised it for the first potential user. It was going to be a veterinarian operation. They did operations, and it was a bunch of small spaces with demising walls that were supported because they were masonry. So for Boyd to go in there, I know that there was substantial changes required to get an open space for vehicles.
And are any of these comparables ones with, as you said, the bays is 7?
No,
Has bays
I
at all?
avoided that. I was looking at body shops.
Okay, so in regards to quality of the buildings, which ones would be comparable to the subject property?
Quality-wise, probably 874 Marion is almost identical in construction. Basically, and if you look at the evidence that's been presented, the subject building was built by Thomas. It's a metal pre-engineered building. And so is 874 Marion. Skirfield is a masonry block building, which was erected on site. And looking at the pictures, I think the rest are all masonry block. Their ceilings are a bit lower, but masonry block is a more expensive method of building. And there's something else in terms of ceiling height. The subject actually in the initial planning, they had specified a ceiling height that they changed, and they dropped it because they realized they didn't need that high of a ceiling height for their usage. I think the original spec height was dropped to 18 feet gross, which is 15 clear, and originally had been higher.
And then, as you had said, 874 Marion was what we at the department considered owner occupied.
Yeah, but you weren't there. I was, and there was a request for penalty, and the penalty was denied, that there was enough variation between the corporation that owned the property and the one that operated it.
Okay, but even though there was
So you became
a connection,
But you became aware of the
we
separation.
consider a market.
You became aware of the separation at the hearing.
Okay, because I saw the company searches, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but the assessment department, through this appeal, became aware of it.
Okay.
And they didn't appeal the penalty decision.
So the comparable rates, are these at all factored in for, on page 10?
This is more of a, as I mentioned, that this was, should be deemed, because it's in an industrial neighborhood and they deal with the truck services, that a concern for the highest and best use is that without the body shop, this would go back to a very good industrial rate, and so we just provided that. Right now, because it's linked, one of the issues in appraisal, and I was asking questions about linkage, is that we are required to consider the effects of assemblage. And because the subject site is connected to Mercedes next door, in my opinion, it enjoys a higher value at $10. Were it not to be connected to that site, we would consider a much lower rate, as evidenced by the rates on 10 and 11. It's just an industrial building.
And you didn't take into account at all that, I know you say it's industrial, but it is right next to a large retail center.
With poor access.
Well, there is lights there now, so.
Well,
it's not-
which is even worse now. The access is off Rothwell Road, and so one has to come off Kenniston to Rothwell, and then you turn to a shared side drive with shared easement. Direct Transport owned all of this land, and they still have the two buildings to the east. One is a cross-dock facility, the other is an office that they recently rented, and this is a piece of their land. So they and Mercedes, the body shop, and the dealership share this same private access road. So it's a bit of a convoluted way to come there. Now the advantage, Mercedes liked it because, as you can see from the picture, it actually, for their dealership, even though they had poor access, they had great visibility on Kenniston, so they had a good display for cars. I think that's about the only use that long skinny piece has. But it came out of a trucking site, Direct Transport, not out of other retail. And without this usage in place, it'll revert back to industrial, and that was my point.
I guess because most of the buildings along Kenniston now, you all have to turn off, because you really can't access any of them directly off of Kenniston. And most of those industrial type units are retail units to the north and south of it.
That's incorrect. Every retail facility on Kenniston has an access off it. Now, they don't all have left-rights, but they all have in-outs. So, for example, if you go just a bit further south, you'll see that there are three major developments at the corner of McGilvery and Kenniston. And
Okay, we're talking about
I was just answering the
retail.
question. I know,
It's not relevant to,
that's my opinion. It's not
I'm just
relevant,
saying
it's not
that it's not
retail.
relevant, that it should be strictly seen as an industrial type of, but that's fine. No further questions.
okay. Is there any summation that you wish to, question from the board, I guess. Jerry, question?
Yeah, just a couple. You mentioned Mr. Newfeld earlier about basement and some of these buildings.
Right,
And I know the dealership has a basement.
Correct.
Does this building?
No.
Have no basement?
no.
And I know you used all of the, well, I don't know all of it, but a lot of other body shops that are comparable.
Yeah, I think the prime reliance was on the other body shop rents on page 7. I've had the opportunity to work for all of these particular owners, so I think that without verification, one should be careful on using rents, and these were at least verified with ownership.
Okay. Quality of the facility itself, is there anything that would come near the subject property
Well,
quality?
I mentioned 874 Marion, it is the same quality.
Oh, okay, yeah, I look at the picture and I was like, I don't know about that.
Oh.
It's hard to tell from the picture, but
Yeah, I see your point, because
Like-
the picture is some distance from the road.
it's not a very complimentary picture. Maybe they need a new photographer, I don't know.
Okay, but that was me who took that picture, so that was not a Google Street View.
That was just a personal dig that I shouldn't have
Yeah,
given.
it is, I'll tell you the key points to look at 874 Marion, which you're not picking up on there. If you look at the doors, those are 14-foot doors.
Oh, okay, yeah, I thought they were like 10 or 12.
Yeah, and so the building's got an 18-foot clear height.
Okay, yeah.
And,
So it's larger than it would appear in the picture.
because we're so far away, and I was
Yeah.
actually taking this picture all the way across from the other side of Marion. I think it's where, is it Dawson comes in, and there's this triangle, and I was on my motorcycle, and so I managed to pull into the triangle there and stop and take a picture, and, without getting run over by a truck.
Okay, yeah, no, the picture's probably deceiving us too.
And then the office portion, which is to the left, is a lower ceiling building that is traditionally framed. It's wood framed, but it actually has a mezzanine storage level, so I was up there. Mezzanine's not usable, but you know, the office is comparable to the office at the subject. But it doesn't, the only thing it doesn't have is that drive-in inspection bay.
Okay, yeah, that was my question.
Lynn? All right, I have no questions, so you can do summation on this?
Do you want to save it for the next one? I'm not suggesting anything, but.
No, I think we can, because for 18, if we want to go over that, it's just pretty much stating a different.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
saving for the next one, just to get it all in.
All right, let's
Yeah.
go on to 2018 then, and just please highlight anything that's different.
Okay, so for the differences, I'll go flip to page. I think for page 8, I just had one different comparable. I added comparable 8 in. For page 9, I think the rate. So the rate for 2018 was $13.72 applied to leasable area. There was some difference in vacancy loss. And the cap rate for 2018 was 6.75%. So to keep it short here, the recommendation was to maintain the 2018 value of the $3,385,000. And that was pretty much the only differences in this one.
Okay, question?
No, I think, oh, yeah, just to double check now on cap rate now. The difference is the cap rate changed and dropped by 3/4 of a point. Are you still think it came out of the office? And I'm just curious,
I'm assuming through the office section that this is, that it would be between the 5.25 and 8.50.
Okay. And the rental rate actually dropped by 3 cents on your model. Is that
Yes.
indicative of a market activity?
It's whatever the modelers determined through the data they analyzed to create the model. I'm unsure on what data was used and why it would have dropped 3 cents.
No, I've never seen it. I generally see the model produces increases
There could be
in
new
this
data
case.
to support something, I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Those are my own questions.
Okay, Lynn, questions? Jerry?
No, good question.
I was going to ask about the cap rate. 0.75% compression on the cap rate seems to be kind of high in the 2-year period. Do you have anything to back that up, or?
Just what's on page, it's just all model generated, sorry, for the cap rate. So what we have there is what we use. I don't have anything specific for this property.
Okay, and in terms of the rental value, that could just be
That
a different sample
Yeah.
of rent
Yeah.
that was given from year to year. Okay, all right, so you can proceed then, Mr. Buffalo.
You do. There was a question earlier, and I'll just briefly touch on it about quality differences. And just point out that the pictures that the assessor used, the image package required by Mercedes, which is does not reflect in the market. You can see they made them build assessors page 4, they made them build the fence, put up the Mercedes logos. A standard image package in an auto dealership runs between $1 and $2 million. You buy it from the manufacturer and you have to install it. Now this image package was a bit less because it's not as heavily logoed, but it's something that we always think in the cost, make sure that people understand that just because Mercedes made them make it look like that doesn't mean anything to value. Sorry for the aside. Now for 18, what we're doing is, I mentioned earlier the concept of assemblage. We were content with the neighboring property as being with the decision reached there, and we believe that these two should be treated as one economic unit. And what we're basically asking for is that we will accept the same values applied to the Mercedes dealership applied to their body shop. And they are built 1 year apart. The quality in Mercedes, the dealership is far superior to the body shop. However, Mercedes has a basement which is in the rates. But the body shop is virtually all shop, whereas Mercedes has a giant 25,000 square foot showroom in it. And those are the differences. Now on page 3 is the order. Page 5 is our calculation of the value, and basically the order said, based on the net operating income presented by the owner with a cap rate of 7.5%. Well, we put a net rent on it of $10.60. They capped it at 7.5%. We did not appeal. The city did not appeal. So this is one of these cases where I'm going to argue equity and case law rather than value. As an independent operation, it's my opinion that the market rents would be lower than $10. Our markets are more lower than $10.60. Our market rents for properties like this are in the single digits. And but as an assemblage, as part of the entire economic unit, the 1060 is something we would consider, and to tell you the truth, we're offering it as more of a settlement basis than, because we're talking about case law, than we are arguing on market value. We're considering them as one economic unit. Comparable to our other ones that we brought in, and you'll note that I bring up the example of 964 Regent again, which is 21,000 square foot body shop with a 50,000 square foot showroom. Rates came in at $970, I should say. This one's newer. We have a 19,000 square foot body shop and a 51,000 square foot showroom. I think equity is a powerful argument because we've heard all these cases. We did not prepare so much as an opinion of market value as we did one of assessable value based on equity and case law. Neither party appealed this decision, which meant in my mind that they were satisfied that 1060 represented a fair rate. So why would they want 1372 on an inferior property next door when we already had a decision? That's what bothers me, and of course bothered the ownership. Aside from that, my opinion is that on a not considering assemblage, we would probably be looking at a rent between $8.50 and $9 and a cap rate in the 8.5 to 9% range to account for the body shop usage. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Questions?
I guess again, just for the rental rates applied by the assessment department, these are board decisions. I can say that 964 Regent, the original building was built in 1967. Yes, the addition was built later, but we don't know.
Questions?
How are we including these for evidence if it's comparing assessments?
No, I'm comparing board decisions.
Okay.
I don't care about your assessments. What I'm comparing is...
So we're not looking at market, we're now
I'm
looking
looking
at
at case law.
board decisions.
Case law.
Okay. And then, so for 23 Rothwell, we're looking at the board decision for 2018, but not at 16.
Well, you
That
know,
one was higher.
in my mind, the 18 decision was unchallenged by either party, and it was accepted at 1060. And in my mind, a reasonable rate for 16 would have been slightly less, which I pegged at $10. That's how I set this. Now, they're well higher than market evidence, but I'm accepting the concept of assemblage.
Further
That's all.
questions? Jerry, any questions?
Could you explain you're accepting the concept of assemblage?
You're just baiting me on the long-winded answer.
No, you can keep it as short as you will.
You can't. Auto dealers in Winnipeg are a variety of different types and operations. There are some that have a body shop on site, there's some that have it located somewhere else, there's some that share a body shop with their other dealerships. But it's an economic unit, so when you're buying an auto dealership and you get the body shop with it, it's desirable. And I've been involved in a lot of transactions, and I know that then purchasers are looking for that complete economic unit. They want new cars, used cars, service, and body shop. And the reason is what makes money. In the old days, everybody knows used cars make far more than new cars. Now, in Manitoba, because of MPI, I don't know if this is a big secret or not, having a body shop is more lucrative these days than some of the other operations, because MPI sets the rates and they're so stupidly high, as we all know from our insurance. Body shop gets a deal, fixed rate for hours, fixed rate for costs, and it's a good return. So you want a body shop, and plus on top of it, you want to keep your business. You want to, in the old days before Mercedes had a body shop, I had a GLK and I had a pergola fall on it, of all things, and they sent me to the Hyundai dealership to have it fixed. Now they have their own, so they're keeping it, they're keeping brand loyalty, and that's a good business practice. So there is a benefit to them to control as much of the auto experience as possible, and it gives them a higher overall value. And the Appraisal Institute, and I'm an accredited appraiser, tells me I must consider the effects of assemblage. Now here, in a board of revision, I could ask for jurisdictional exception and say, no, site by site, that's the way we gotta do it. I could do it. In this case, we're dealing with a unique property, the auto dealers, I think we gotta look at it. Point West, as an example, they built a body shop that all the dealers share. They had to be part of their economic unit. And that body shop is assessed at the same rate per square foot as the dealerships, because it becomes part of their unit. Vickers Chev, same thing. They're getting the same rate on their body shop. We used to Keystone Ford, used to be my client, now before the Chipmans bought it. Same issue. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that concept. If anything, it's going to produce a higher assessment because the body shop on its own is going to be worth less. As I mentioned, I would see lower rents and higher caps on its own. But being part of the package, there is a benefit, and I gotta stick with my standards and put forward that argument.
So, would this require that they be all wrapped up in the same assessment roll?
If it were legally possible, yes. Right now that can't be done because it's on a leasehold estate. However, the lease is not a lease, it's a purchase agreement, so it will be transferred in the future to the owner, and they will likely look at an amalgamation. I'll suggest one to them.
Consolidation of title.
No, never consolidate title, consolidate the roll. And the reason is because when the minute you consolidate the title, say you wanted to subdivide, you gotta pay dedication all over.
Right.
Never consolidate a title.
Okay.
But you can consolidate assessment rolls.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any questions? Did the dealership include a service area?
Yes, it was a blended rate that included I think it's about 10,000 square feet of showroom, 20,000 of service, 4,800 mezzanine office, and 15,000 square foot basement, which is, we had a great argument on the basement value at the board, but the assessor wanted a rate on the basement of like $10 or $11 and 13 on the main, and we argued, and we got a blended rate of $10.60 for the whole thing.
Okay, that leads to my next question then. The rate on the basement kind of depresses the rates that were applied
Right.
to the,
However, the 15,000 square feet of office showroom increased the rate. 15,000 feet of basement, 15,000 feet of showroom balances it off, because, in my opinion, because now we're dealing with a body shop that has, the office is not showroom quality, it's just office for accessory use, and it's mostly all body shop.
Okay, I have no more questions. Now, any summation on the realty value then, either 2017 or 18?
Just for combined, I used the market rents we had available. Again, I had said the declared construction cost, which is, what do I have there? Around 4.4, just under 4.4 million. It's a newer building. I tried to find comparables that were of similar services and quality, and that's pretty much it, just the.
Okay, and Rocky,
Yes,
on realty?
I do. The assessment department has failed to consider the effects of zoning. We are in an industrial neighborhood, and this goes to the highest and best use, which now is the dealership. However, let's get back to the principle I was discussing earlier. You don't appraise or assess the bricks and mortar, you appraise the rights. And foremost in there is the zoning. There's a less, this is a more restrictive use than all the comparables the assessor brought forward, which with the exception of one were C-zoned. The site was designed to accommodate not just expensive Mercedes cars, but Mercedes trucks, which is a different zoning classification, which you can only do in M zoning. And that was the reason they moved to this area, to be in an industrial neighborhood with more room and with the ability to bring in their truck line. And Mercedes builds over 10 million vehicles a year, and believe it or not, the trucks are probably one of the largest components of that. And if you notice our city, look at the service vehicles and take note of what people are driving these days. They're driving Mercedes trucks. In Europe, every road transport vehicle, 50% of them are Mercedes. They want that market. They have to be in an industrial zone neighborhood. That impacts the rights, the value, and everything else. That's why this is separate. Now, aside from that, this is one of the rare cases where I think we have to consider what rulings have been done in the past, not what assessments, but what rulings. The assessment department has presented a case where they just went right back to their original model. We all know that the boards have adjusted that original model in all of their decisions. I'm bringing you those adjusted values. I think they're reasonable. For me to ask for the same rate for the Mercedes dealership as the body shop is actually higher than it should be, but I am considering the effects of assemblage. I am stunned at the fact that the neighbor's 1060 with a dealership and the assessment department wants 1372, and the cap rate is 7.5 versus 675. That is stunning. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Okay, let's move on quickly to the business. Again, I don't want to preempt your arguments, but whatever our decision on the lease rate will be on the,
Right, so you just wanna clarify the air-conditioned space, and I'm fine with that, and you haven't changed your numbers, have you? You're at 1372?
I haven't. Everything I have is generated from the model, and if I have to adjust air conditioning, I will look into that, and it obviously wasn't adjusted when it was put onto the roll, so I'll
okay,
make those changes when
go over
we come
the,
up with this.
go over the issue on air conditioning then, since we haven't heard anything about it other than hints.
Okay.
It's in,
Mine's just one page
Oh, where did they go?
for the business.
Here it is. on this
yeah,
one.
here it's on this page, it's under your.
Oh,
Yeah.
so tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. We gotta switch modes and get into business
Business, yeah.
assessment mode.
Wrong button.
Okay,
Okay, so this is file number 18-724, and again, 15 Rothwell Road, business assessment ID 53891. So we have the base annual rental value is $13.75 for 2017, and we applied the air conditioning rate to the entire area. If that is incorrect, we're obviously going to fix that and adjust it so it is a permanent adjustment, and it won't happen again. Again, my comparables are from my brief, and I'm asking just to recommend to maintain the 2017 ARV of $301,980.
okay,
Have you had an opportunity to review the sketches to determine the air-conditioned area?
Yeah, so what I'm looking at is probably just the office space
Right.
and the mezzanine.
Do you have an estimate of how that size? Because I would rather deal with it at the board than, not that I don't trust you, but there's a few people in your department are rather lethargic.
let's not get into anything like that.
I was being polite. I didn't just deal with one, at least deal with one issue.
The only problem is like from my permit plans that I printed out, well, I guess I can kind of make it out. Do you want me to calculate it right now? For-
I'm asking you to.
Like,
Yeah, if you take a minute, if we can
Okay.
solve it here, let's solve it here. Meanwhile, I'll get a glass
is
of
part
water.
storage air conditioning?
No.
Is the front entrance air conditioning where, like that jut out only on the main floor?
The foyer?
Yes.
No, that's just a space heater in there.
Okay. So I calculated 94 feet by 26 feet, which is the 2,444. That's the main floor. And then
2, 4, 4.
So if I took, 94 by 26, 2,444 square feet.
Yeah.
Looks to be air conditioned on the main. And I would just apply that same to the second because it seemed to just,
Yeah, well, we had come up with an initial estimate of 5,500, but that's before I realized that the drive-through wasn't air. So you're saying roughly 4888?
yes, if that's, so you're saying the drive-through is the front part here that's
Yeah.
open to below, and then is there a wall separating them on the second floor?
The drive-through, no, it's just a single floor. It's just,
If you're on the second floor, can you look out to the drive-through area and it's open?
no,
Right.
no,
Oh, okay,
it's.
if there's
it's
a wall, okay, then
it's
that's
a-
fine then, yes.
Yeah,
So that would be my,
4888, that's fine.
Okay, does someone come up with a
Oh,
value for us then?
so that's times point, 32?
0.30 for the air conditioning.
Oh, it depends, I guess, what year. right?
Well, for 17, I'm looking at. Like how much was 1,466?
yeah.
Okay, so you got total occupancy costs then?
So they would be adjusted to, I think occupancy costs before were 41,651, and then they would go to 37,438 if we round up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I got. I got 37,440 roughly. The other one I got 39,998.
So we come to an ARV of 297,770 roughly?
Yes.
Now we just gotta make sure it's divided by 12.
2977.
Yeah.
297, what's the number?
Well, just, and I'm not saying anything, meaning anything by it, but just the undisputed issues that we're going to agree on occupancy costs.
Yeah.
And maybe we should just clarify that, and then if the.
Yeah, you're right, we're gonna have to decide what we're gonna do with
Should, so
base
The base
ARV.
area.
41,653 becomes 37,440, and the 2018, 44,493, I've got 39,998, or rounded to 40,000.
For 2018,
18.
okay, oh yeah.
I don't know, does that look right?
So the occupancy was 44 for that year.
I just took the difference in square footage times the rate and subtracted it from from the costs.
It's the easy way of doing things, but why would we wanna do things the easy way?
I always look at it, but you heard that before with the property tax issue. There's real simple ways of doing this.
So the occupancy you said was gonna be 40,000.
Well, it's a couple dollars under it, but 40,000 even is fine if it makes the records look nicer. I got 39,998.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, but we're gonna have to
Mhm.
massage that
Yeah.
to whatever we get to make it divisible by 12. Okay, so is there anything either party wishes to add then on the business? And we've heard the arguments on the base ARV in both years.
Yeah.
Just one statement and submission, and that's it for me.
Okay.
Yeah?
I'm good for being.
Okay. The only point I would like to bring forward is you heard me discuss in realty about the concepts of equity and board decisions. That's not in the Municipal Assessment Act, but it is something I find reasonable. However, the City of Winnipeg Charter directs us to look at equity in business tax. There's a separate law that says that assessments should be based on fair and equitable comparing to other similar uses. So I think the board's already made their rulings on the values, and I'm comfortable with those. Thanks.
Well, I will make one statement that board of revision rulings are persuasive but not binding. All right, thank you very much for your time, and we will get back to you in due course.